He utterly hated Marilyn Monroe. Now we know the reason why. Tony Curtis was born Bernard Schwartz on June 3, 1925, in Manhattan, New York City, at the Fifth Avenue Hospital, located on the corner of East 105th Street. As the first of three boys born to Helen and Emanuel Schwartz, his early life was shaped by the struggles of a working-class immigrant family. Curtis's parents were Hungarian Jewish immigrants from Czechoslovakia and Hungary, and they faced immense economic challenges in their new country. His father worked as a tailor, and the family lived in the back of the tailor shop, crammed into a small space that separated them from customers by mere feet. Emanuel Schwartz toiled to make ends meet, but the business barely sustained the family. The tiny living quarters reflected the modest and difficult life the Schwartzes led, with the parents occupying one corner of the shop and Tony and his two younger brothers, Julius and Robert, in another. Curtis's upbringing was deeply influenced by the immigrant experience, which, for many Jewish families at the time, was a blend of economic hardship and dreams of a better life. Like other immigrants, his parents clung to the hope that their children would grow up with more opportunities than they had in Europe. However, the stark realities of poverty were ever present, forcing the young Bernard to grow up quickly. His father's struggles in maintaining the business meant long hours and little time for leisure or affection. This led to a sense of isolation for Curtis, as his parents were consumed by their efforts to survive financially in America, leaving little emotional support for their children. Curtis' mother, Helen, appeared as a participant on the popular television show You Bet Your Life on February 9, 1956, hosted by the iconic comedian Groucho Marx. Although this was a rare moment of public exposure, it later became known that Curtis' mother suffered from schizophrenia, a mental illness that cast a long shadow over the family. Schizophrenia was not well understood at the time, and the stigma surrounding mental illness often meant families suffered in silence. Helen's diagnosis brought instability and confusion into Curtis's early life, and her unpredictable behavior added another layer of difficulty to an already challenging childhood. Curtis' youngest brother, Robert, was also institutionalized due to schizophrenia, a family tragedy that profoundly affected Curtis. With two close family members battling severe mental health issues, Curtis had to navigate his own emotional challenges while also dealing with the trauma of seeing his family members institutionalized. Mental illness was a source of deep emotional pain, something Curtis rarely discussed publicly in his early years. His family's struggle with mental health likely contributed to Curtis' drive to escape his circumstances and seek a better life through acting. When Curtis was just 8 years old, he and his brother Julius were placed in an orphanage for a month because their parents could not afford to feed them. This was one of the most harrowing experiences of Curtis' young life, as the orphanage was a stark reminder of the family's financial fragility. The separation from his parents, coupled with the feeling of abandonment, left a lasting emotional scar. Though their stay in the orphanage was temporary, it underscored the severity of the family's economic situation. 4 years later, tragedy struck when Julius was killed by a truck. Curtis, then just 12 years old, was devastated by the loss of his brother, who had been his closest companion in a difficult childhood. The accident left Curtis with a deep sense of grief, and his brother's untimely death marked a turning point in his life. In the wake of Julius's death, Curtis found himself drifting toward a path of delinquency. He joined a local gang in his New York neighborhood, a group of boys whose main activities included skipping school and committing petty thefts at local dime stores. For Curtis, the gang offered a sense of belonging and an outlet for the anger and sadness he carried from his tumultuous family life and the loss of his brother. However, his involvement with the gang also put him at risk of descending further into a life of crime. Curtis later admitted that he was on the verge of becoming a juvenile delinquent, and it seemed his life might take a dangerous turn. Fortunately, when Curtis was 11 years old, a kind neighbor intervened and offered him a lifeline. This neighbor, seeing potential in the troubled young boy, arranged for Curtis to attend a Boy Scout camp. This experience was transformative for Curtis, providing him with an opportunity to channel his energy into constructive activities rather than delinquent behavior. The discipline, camaraderie, and outdoor experiences offered by the Boy Scouts helped Curtis regain focus and redirect his life. He later credited this experience with saving him from what could have been a life of crime. Boy Scout camp also gave Curtis a glimpse of a world beyond his impoverished upbringing and planted the seeds for the dreams of a brighter future. Curtis attended Seward Park High School, where he found solace in school activities and began to develop an interest in acting. At 16, Curtis had his first taste of acting when he participated in a school stage play. Though the role was small, it sparked a passion within him. Acting became an escape, a way for Curtis to express himself and step outside the confines of his difficult reality. His brief foray into school theater marked the beginning of a journey that would eventually lead him to Hollywood. In 1948, at the age of 23, Curtis made the bold decision to move to Hollywood. With little more than ambition and a dream, he set out for California, determined to make something of himself. As luck would have it, Curtis's journey to Hollywood included a chance encounter with Jack Warner, one of the most powerful men in the film industry at the time. Meeting Warner on the plane was a stroke of fortune that gave Curtis a foot in the door. Though not immediately leading to stardom, the encounter symbolized the kind of breaks Curtis would need to rise in the competitive world of show business. Around this time, Curtis also had a brief romantic relationship with Marilyn Monroe, long before either of them achieved the fame they would later enjoy. Their relationship, though short-lived, was a glimpse into the glamorous life that awaited Curtis in Hollywood. Upon arriving in Hollywood, Curtis was signed to a contract with Universal Pictures, where he was trained in the essential skills needed for an actor of the time: fencing, horseback riding, and physical conditioning. He changed his name from Bernard Schwartz to Anthony Curtis, a decision made to give himself a more Americanized and marketable identity. The name Anthony came from the novel Anthony Adverse, while Curtis was inspired by Kurtz, a family name on his mother's side. At Universal, Curtis found himself in the company of other rising stars like Rock Hudson, James Best, Julie Adams, and Piper Laurie, all of whom were navigating the early stages of their careers in the highly competitive film industry. Despite his training and connections, Curtis admitted that in his early years in Hollywood, his primary motivations were girls and money. Like many young actors, Curtis was caught up in the glamour and excitement of Hollywood, enjoying the social scene and the newfound attention. However, he was also haunted by a deep fear of failure. The prospect of having to return to the Bronx, defeated and embarrassed, loomed large in his mind. Curtis later reflected that his desire to avoid failure at all costs was a driving force behind his ambition. Over time, this fear pushed him to take his career more seriously, and he gradually evolved from a young man chasing fun to a dedicated actor committed to honing his craft. Tony Curtis made his uncredited screen debut in 1949 with the crime drama Criss Cross, where he played a rumba dancer alongside the glamorous Yvonne De Carlo. This role, although minor and without dialogue, marked his first appearance in film and set the stage for a long and successful career. The film's male lead was Burt Lancaster, who was already an established star, and this collaboration was significant as it laid the groundwork for a professional relationship that would span several films. Lancaster and Curtis would go on to appear together in notable films, including Trapeze, 1956, and Sweet Smell of Success, 1957, forming one of Hollywood's enduring on-screen partnerships. In Criss Cross, Curtis's brief but eye-catching appearance showcased his good looks and natural charisma, traits that would become hallmarks of his early career. Despite the lack of billing, the experience opened doors for Curtis and introduced him to the world of Hollywood filmmaking. Curtis's second film appearance came later in 1949 with City Across the River, in which he was credited as Anthony Curtis for the first time, marking the beginning of his journey under his now famous screen name. Though his role was small, his growing presence on screen made him increasingly visible to audiences. That same year, he had a tiny role in The Lady Gambles, 1949, a film where he delivered just 4 lines, but his talent was beginning to shine through. The experience of working on multiple sets in quick succession in 1949 helped Curtis develop his acting skills and gain crucial experience. He played larger parts in films such as Johnny Stool Pigeon, 1949, a crime drama that allowed him to interact more with his co-stars, gaining him more recognition within the industry. These early roles, while not leading parts, were essential in establishing Curtis as a reliable, young actor with potential. In 1950, Curtis was featured in several films, including Francis, a comedy where a talking mule played a major role. Curtis also appeared in Woman in Hiding and I Was a Shoplifter that same year. These films were typical B-movies of the era, but Curtis' consistent work kept his name in front of casting directors and helped him build his reputation. That year, he also made his first foray into the Western genre with Sierra, 1950, where he acted alongside Audie Murphy, a World War II hero-turned-actor. Westerns were a popular genre in Hollywood at the time, and Curtis' ability to appear in such films demonstrated his versatility. He then appeared in Winchester 73, 1950, a major success starring James Stewart and Shelley Winters, further solidifying Curtis's place in Hollywood. His final Western appearance in 1951's Kansas Raiders, where he played Kid Dalton, was another role that contributed to his growing resume, and his name was now being billed as Tony Curtis, the name under which he would become famous. By this point, Curtis had developed a strong following, receiving a significant amount of fan mail, which caught the attention of Universal Pictures. As a result, they decided to give him his first starring role in The Prince Who Was a Thief, 1951. A swashbuckling adventure set in the Middle East co-starring Piper Laurie. The film was a major box office success and officially marked Curtis' rise to stardom. His charming screen presence and good looks made him a natural fit for these action-packed, exotic-themed films, and The Prince Who Was a Thief became a defining moment in his early career. It also began his on-screen partnership with Piper Laurie, with whom he would co-star in several more films, helping to establish Curtis as a leading man capable of carrying a movie on his own. Following the success of The Prince Who Was a Thief, Curtis starred in several more films in 1952, including Flesh and Fury, a gritty boxing movie that allowed Curtis to show a more serious and physically demanding side of his acting. He also reunited with Piper Laurie in the lighthearted comedy No Room for the Groom, directed by Douglas Sirk, who would later become famous for his glossy melodramas. Curtis' role in Son of Ali Baba, 1952, another swashbuckler set in the Arab world, capitalized on the popularity of his previous film with Laurie. These roles helped Curtis hone his craft, expanding his range from action and adventure to comedy and drama, further solidifying his standing as a Hollywood heartthrob. In 1953, Curtis teamed up with his then-wife Janet Leigh in Houdini, where he played the famous magician and escape artist. The film allowed Curtis to show off his dramatic chops while also creating an on-screen dynamic with Leigh, whom he had married in 1951. Their off-screen romance helped to heighten the public's interest in the film, and their on-screen chemistry was palpable. Houdini was a significant turning point for Curtis, as it allowed him to portray a more mature, multi-dimensional character. Following Houdini, Curtis starred in a series of B-movies, including All American, 1953, where he played a college football player, and Beachhead, 1954, a war film in which he played a soldier. While these films did not elevate Curtis to critical acclaim, they were solid box office performers and further increased his popularity with audiences. Curtis also continued his collaboration with Piper Laurie in films like Johnny Dark, 1954, a racing car drama, and The Black Shield of Falworth, 1954, a medieval swashbuckler where he co-starred with Janet Leigh once again. Although these films did not receive critical accolades, they were successful at the box office and proved that Curtis had the star power to attract audiences. His rugged good looks and on-screen charisma made him a favorite in genre films, and his name was becoming synonymous with box office hits. By 1955, Curtis was ready for a change of pace, and he took on a role in the musical So This Is Paris. The film was a departure from his usual fare and showcased his versatility as an actor. However, it was his next few films that would cement his status as a serious actor. Six Bridges to Cross, 1955, saw Curtis play a bank robber, and in The Purple Mask, 1955, he returned to his swashbuckling roots. He also starred in The Square Jungle, 1955, another boxing film. These films demonstrated that Curtis was capable of handling a variety of roles, from musicals to crime dramas, and his popularity continued to soar. Curtis's career took a major leap forward in 1956 when he was cast alongside Burt Lancaster and Gina Lollobrigida in Trapeze. The film, produced by Hecht Lancaster Productions, was one of the biggest hits of the year and catapulted Curtis into the upper echelon of Hollywood stars. His performance as a trapeze artist showcased his athleticism and charisma, and the film's success solidified his status as a bankable leading man. Around this time, Curtis and Janet Leigh also formed their own independent production company, Kurt Leigh Productions, in 1955, further demonstrating their influence in Hollywood. In 1957, Curtis took on roles in westerns again with the Rawhide Years and ventured into other genres with films like Mr. Corey and The Midnight Story. But it was his role as Sidney Falco, a scheming press agent, in Sweet Smell of Success, 1957, that earned him his first major critical acclaim. Starring alongside Burt Lancaster, Curtis delivered a powerful performance that marked a turning point in his career. Although the film was not a commercial success, Curtis's role as the morally compromised Falco earned him rave reviews, proving that he was not just a pretty face but a talented actor capable of complex roles. In 1958, Curtis continued his rise with another major hit, The Vikings, where he starred alongside Kirk Douglas and Janet Leigh. His rugged performance in the epic adventure film was widely praised, and the film was a box office triumph. That same year, Curtis co-starred with Frank Sinatra and Natalie Wood in Kings Go Forth, a war story that, while not as successful as The Vikings, further showcased Curtis's versatility. But it was The Defiant Ones, 1958, where Curtis delivered one of the most important performances of his career. Starring opposite Sidney Poitier, Curtis played a bigoted white escaped convict chained to Poitier's black man. The film was a critical and commercial success, and Curtis earned an Academy Award nomination for his role. His performance in The Defiant Ones proved that he was not just a matinee idol but an actor of substance and depth. This role marked the pinnacle of Curtis' dramatic achievements and solidified his legacy as one of Hollywood's most talented leading men. The relationship between Tony Curtis and Marilyn Monroe was famously turbulent, and Curtis harbored deep resentment toward her for much of his life. Their volatile connection began during the making of Some Like It Hot, 1959, a film that became iconic for its comedy but was equally notorious behind the scenes due to the tension between its stars. Curtis and Monroe's professional and personal interactions were fraught with difficulties, creating an environment of frustration and animosity that left Curtis with a lasting bitterness toward the actress. Tony Curtis, a seasoned actor known for his roles in films like The Defiant Ones and Sweet Smell of Success, was already a Hollywood star by the time he was cast in Some Like It Hot. Monroe, meanwhile, had cemented her status as a sex symbol and a box office sensation. On the surface, the two seemed like a perfect match for a lighthearted comedy, but behind the scenes, their personalities and working styles could not have been more different. Curtis was a disciplined actor, eager to complete takes efficiently, while Monroe was notoriously difficult on set, often arriving late, forgetting lines, or requiring numerous retakes to get a scene right. This clash in professionalism took its toll on Curtis, who frequently voiced his frustration with Monroe's unpredictability. Her tardiness and inability to focus exasperated him, and he began to resent her lack of discipline. According to Curtis, working with Monroe was an exhausting experience that tested his patience and professional integrity. Monroe's insecurities and demands for constant reassurance only worsened the situation, as Curtis felt that she was being indulged at his expense. Adding fuel to the fire of their working relationship was the fact that Curtis and Monroe had once been romantically involved. In the early 1950s, before Monroe had fully ascended to superstardom, the two shared a brief and intense affair. Though Curtis initially found Monroe captivating and charming, the relationship fizzled out quickly. By the time they reunited on the set of Some Like It Hot, whatever positive feelings had existed between them had long since evaporated. Curtis later described kissing Monroe on screen as akin to kissing Hitler, a harsh remark that underscored his deep animosity toward her. Curtis's comment was not only indicative of his personal disdain for Monroe but also a reflection of the emotional scars left by their past relationship. He believed that Monroe had changed dramatically since their brief romance, evolving into a diva whose ego and insecurities now overshadowed her talents. This personal history between them added layers of tension to their working relationship, as unresolved feelings and past grievances simmered beneath the surface. The production of Some Like It Hot was a stressful experience for nearly everyone involved, but Curtis seemed to suffer the most from Monroe's erratic behavior. While the film was a critical and commercial success, garnering numerous awards and cementing Monroe's legacy as a comedic actress, Curtis's memories of the project were tainted by his negative experiences with her. Even decades after the film's release, Curtis continued to speak openly about his disdain for Monroe, a rare move in an industry where stars often gloss over interpersonal conflicts for the sake of preserving legacies. Curtis believed that Monroe's on-set behavior was emblematic of her deeper issues with fame and self-worth, and he felt that she was more interested in maintaining her image as a glamorous star than in being a committed actress. He was not alone in his frustrations. Other co-stars and crew members reportedly found Monroe difficult to work with, but Curtis was the most vocal about his displeasure, cementing his reputation as one of Monroe's harshest critics. For Curtis, his hatred of Monroe was not just professional, it took a personal and psychological toll. He often spoke of how Monroe's presence affected his ability to enjoy what should have been a crowning achievement in his career. Though Some Like It Hot remains one of the most beloved comedies of all time, Curtis could never fully appreciate the film's success because of the bitter memories it conjured. In interviews later in life, he seemed to view the film as a reminder of the toxicity he experienced on set, and his resentment toward Monroe only grew as her legend continued to rise after her tragic death in 1962. Monroe's enduring legacy as a Hollywood icon also contributed to Curtis's bitterness. While she was often remembered fondly and idealized as a tragic figure, Curtis saw her as a deeply flawed individual whose personal struggles made life difficult for those around her. He felt that Monroe's reputation was unjustly positive, given the hardship she caused on set, and he resented that her stardom seemed to eclipse his own achievements in Some Like It Hot. Even as Curtis aged and reflected on his long career, his feelings toward Monroe remained largely unchanged. He continued to describe her in negative terms, reinforcing the narrative that she had been the most difficult person he ever worked with. While others in Hollywood were more willing to overlook Monroe's faults and focus on her talent and tragic demise, Curtis maintained a more critical view, unwilling to separate her personal struggles from her professional behavior. In many ways, Tony Curtis's hatred of Marilyn Monroe became a defining aspect of his public persona in his later years. Though he was a versatile and accomplished actor with a career spanning several decades, his bitter remarks about Monroe often overshadowed his other achievements. His animosity toward her stood as a stark reminder that even in Hollywood, where image and legacy are carefully curated, personal grievances can leave lasting scars.